The snow came down harder the moment Bryce slammed the car door shut. He didn't look back, not once, as the tires spit slush behind him and the red taillights disappeared into the white. Mara stood exactly where he'd left her, half sunk into a bank of ice, one hand gripping the open armrest of her old wheelchair and the other shaking from the cold. Her leg brace had locked again. She couldn't straighten it, couldn't bend it. Bryce knew that. He'd seen her struggle to even get into the car that morning. But he didn't care. Not anymore. "It's not like anyone's going to notice you gone," he'd said, just before pushing her chair beside the road near the service gate of his office park, and muttering something about not wanting her seen by his new clients. "Wait here," he said. "I'll be back in 20. That was 40 minutes ago. Now even the shape of the road had vanished in the storm. Mara had tried to move, tried to shift her weight and maybe scoot herself back into the chair, but her body didn't cooperate the way it used to. Since the accident 6 months ago, even standing was a negotiation. And Bryce had never adjusted. She had watched him drift from concern to impatience, then from impatience to shame. He didn't want a wife with braces, with medical bills, with limitations. He wanted the version of her that walked into a party on heels and held everyone's attention. Not the woman shaking now in the snow, wondering how many minutes until her fingers stopped responding. A sound, a car door slamming in the distance, cut through the white hush. She squinted, hoping it was him, that guilt had tugged at him just enough to turn around. But it wasn't Bryce. The sleek black car that pulled up wasn't his rusted-out sedan. This one glided to a stop like it belonged to someone who'd never had to worry about parking tickets. The window rolled down slowly. A man in a charcoal gray coat leaned out. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was warm, clipped with the precision of someone who didn't waste words. "No," Mara said before she could think. "I was supposed to be picked up." The man looked at her, really looked at her, not with pity, not with suspicion, just awareness. "You're freezing," he said. He got out of the car. No hesitation. He walked directly to her, knelt in the snow, and said, "May I?" Before she could answer, he was wrapping her scarf tighter, adjusting her coat, and lifting her chair upright with smooth efficiency. "I'm going to get you into the car, okay?" "I wait. Who are you?" she asked, breath catching. "Name's Camden. Camden Rourke. I own this property." Her heart stuttered. Rourke, as in Bryce's boss, the CEO of the development firm Bryce had spent the last year trying to impress. "You work with my husband," she whispered. Camden's jaw shifted slightly, but he didn't react. "Let's get you warm first." He lifted her, carefully, and for the first time in months, she felt something in someone's touch she hadn't felt in a long time. Respect. Not a savior, not a handler. Just a man helping a woman in the snow. Once she was settled in the passenger seat, the heat already pouring toward her, he turned back toward the road. "Did he leave you here?" he asked without turning his head. "Yes," she said, the word dropping like a stone. Camden didn't answer, not with words, but she saw his hands tighten briefly on the steering wheel before he pulled onto the road, slow and steady. "Where to?" he asked. "Just anywhere warm," she whispered. He nodded once. "I know just the place." The room smelled of cedar wood and leather, and Mara wasn't sure if it was real or just her body finally thawing. Camden had driven her not to a hospital or a coffee shop, but to a restored stone guest house tucked behind the company's main office complex. He hadn't said much during the ride, only asked once if she preferred silence or small talk. She'd said silence. He'd respected it. Now, inside this quiet, fire-lit room, she sat wrapped in a thick throw blanket on a deep leather chair that swallowed her in warmth. Camden had disappeared into the kitchen moments after helping her in, only to return with a bowl of steaming soup, a glass of water, and a gaze that never hovered too long. "You don't owe me anything," he said as he set the tray down. "I just didn't want to leave you out there." Mara nodded, unsure what to say. Every kindness felt like it might collapse her. For months, every interaction had come with conditions. Bryce's impatience, the nurse's clock, the insurance agent's tone. But here sat a man who didn't blink when her leg brace squeaked, or when she needed help adjusting her position. "This is your property?" she finally asked. "The guest house, the grounds?" Camden nodded. "Part of the original Rourke estate. We use it for out-of-town execs mostly. It's empty this week." "You let strangers in often?" "Only when they've been left in the snow." She looked at him then, this man who had appeared from nowhere like some unplanned chapter. He was in his early 40s, maybe, hair a touch silver at the sides, jawline square but soft at the edges like someone who didn't rush toward anger. His shirt was pressed, but there was no tie, and the way he crouched beside the fire to stir it said he wasn't afraid of being useful. "Bryce talks about you sometimes," she said cautiously. "He's been trying to get on your good side for months." Camden looked over his shoulder. "Bryce Eldon?" She nodded. "My husband." His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes stilled. "Interesting." "Why?" she asked. "Because I just reviewed a proposal of his this morning," Camden said slowly, "and I had questions about its integrity." Mara swallowed hard. "That doesn't surprise me." He stood then, dusting ash from his palm. "You're welcome to stay here tonight if you'd like. There's a private room, clean sheets. You'll be safe." "I don't want to cause trouble," she said. "Too late," he replied gently. "But the kind worth causing." She stared into the fire after he left the room, her fingers tightening around the mug. Bryce had abandoned her in the middle of a snowstorm and gone to work like it was just another day. She'd spent months trying to forgive his withdrawal, his resentment, his way of turning her injury into a weight he couldn't bear. But this, leaving her in freezing snow so he wouldn't look bad in front of colleagues, this had snapped something final inside her. She looked around the room, the stone walls, the stack of books on the side table, the quilt folded neatly on a cedar trunk. It was more comfort than she'd known in a year. Not because it was luxurious, but because it was intentional, thoughtful, safe. Her phone buzzed weakly on the side table. Battery almost gone. A single message. "Bryce. Where are you? You better not say anything stupid to anyone." She stared at it. Then she powered the phone off and tucked it into the folds of the blanket. In the hallway, she heard Camden speaking quietly into his phone. "No, she's safe." "Yes, I saw the footage. I'll handle it personally. No, don't contact him yet." She didn't know who he was talking to, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like the weak one. Mara awoke to the low sound of jazz playing from a speaker tucked discreetly on a shelf. The fire had burned down to soft embers, but the room still held its warmth like a quiet promise. She didn't remember falling asleep. Her body had simply surrendered, like a soldier returned from a long march. It was the first time in weeks her hands hadn't trembled from the cold or the anxiety. The first time she hadn't clenched her jaw while pretending everything was fine. Her leg still ached, but the usual edge of shame that came with it was absent. She moved slowly, careful not to startle the calm inside her. Her crutches leaned neatly against the arm of the chair. Camden must have placed them there while she slept. A folded note rested beside a small breakfast tray. "Went to the main office. Take your time. There's oatmeal and coffee, no pressure. C. She stared at the note longer than she needed to, memorizing the clean, decisive handwriting. Bryce used to scribble everything, even birthday cards, as though writing to her was an inconvenience. She ate slowly, letting each spoonful of oatmeal settle her. When she was done, she washed the dish herself and left it drying beside the sink. She changed into a fresh thermal shirt Camden had left folded on the counter. Plain navy, a bit loose, but clean and soft. When she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her face looked less hollow. Her eyes weren't darting, just steady. Later that morning, Camden returned, his coat dusted with new snow. He brought groceries, no explanation, just a smile and a bag of clementines, which he set down on the counter. "You like citrus?" he asked. "I used to," she said, surprised by her own honesty. "Not lately?" "Nothing's tasted like anything since the accident." He nodded thoughtfully, then peeled one and handed it to her. "Try now." She took a bite. It was cold, tart, clean, and for the first time in months, it made her blink. "That's actually good." "Sometimes it's not the food," he said. "It's the space we're eating it in." She laughed softly. "You're full of quotes. Only the ones I believe." She noticed then he had a folder tucked under his arm. "You heading into meetings?" she asked. "Not today," he said, setting the folder on the table. "I spent the morning reviewing Bryce's records." She froze. "Camden." "I didn't go looking," he said. "But yesterday I saw a man leave his wife in a snowbank because she made him uncomfortable. I couldn't ignore that." She sank into the chair, the warmth from the fire suddenly unable to stop her chill. "He'll spin it. He always does." "I'm not asking you to defend him," Camden said gently. "I just wanted you to know I've already suspended his access to our client files." Her breath caught. "You... what?" "There were discrepancies. And a pattern. Not just with you. He'll say I made you do it." "He'd be wrong," Camden said. "You didn't ask me to do anything. You just survived. The rest is on him." She pressed her hand against her mouth. The wave of emotion wasn't grief. It was release. For so long she had felt powerless. But now someone had seen, had acted. Not out of pity, but justice. "Thank you," she whispered. Camden sat down across from her. "I don't know what's next for you. I won't pretend to. But I do know you don't have to go back to that house." "It's not just the house," she said. "It's the identity. The failure of being someone he could walk away from." "Or maybe," Camden said, "you're someone who stayed standing when she had every reason to collapse." She met his gaze, unflinching now. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said, his voice quiet. "And I'm willing to learn the rest, if you let me." The cab Bryce sent arrived late and honked twice from the curb like it was calling a dog. Mara watched it through the frosted guesthouse window, unmoving. Camden stood beside her, silent. She hadn't told him about the message Bryce had sent that morning. "Get your things. I'll cover the fare. Don't embarrass me any further." No apology, no explanation, just logistics. It was the final confirmation she hadn't needed. She turned from the window and picked up her bag, the same one she'd packed with tremors the night before. Not because she was leaving the guest house, because she was done letting Bryce decide what she did with her life. "I'm not getting in that car," she said. "I figured," Camden replied, his voice calm. "It's still your choice, though." "No," she said. "It's finally mine." She watched as the cab idled, then eventually drove away. Bryce didn't call, didn't text. She knew he expected her to crawl back in her own time, too broken to survive elsewhere. But he'd underestimated one thing: How healing begins not when someone helps you up, but when someone stops stepping on your hands while you try. That afternoon, Camden offered her the guest house as a temporary space. "Stay as long as you need. No strings. You're not a guest. You're recovering. That's different." She accepted, but insisted on making dinner. It was something she hadn't done in months, not since Bryce started mocking her for how slow she moved or how clumsy her grip had become. "Maybe I'll ruin it," she said. "I don't mind ruined," Camden replied. She found herself humming while slicing onions, and when she spilled the pepper, he didn't sigh. He laughed and helped sweep it up. They ate on the back porch, bundled in blankets, while the snow lightened into flurries. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't anything you could label. It was just stillness. Trust. She told him about the accident that took her mobility. The ice patch, the shattered femur, the surgeries. How her body worked differently now, and so did her fear. She told him how Bryce stopped touching her, how his eyes started skipping over her like she was furniture. Camden didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. "You know what I hated the most?" she said. "It wasn't the pain. It was the feeling that I had to apologize for it. For existing this way." Camden nodded slowly. "Pain isn't weakness, and if someone makes you feel that way, it says more about them than you." "You really believe that?" "I've lived it," he said simply. "My sister's in a chair. She's tougher than I'll ever be." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was shared. The next day, Mara emailed her doctor and resumed therapy sessions. She called her sister and said the words she hadn't dared say in months. "I need a fresh start." That night, she asked Camden what he wanted out of life. Not about work, but truly. He said, "I want to be the kind of person who notices who's missing from the table, not just who's loudest at it." She smiled. "Then you're doing just fine." The knock came early, sharp and entitled. 3 fast raps against the guest house door like it already belonged to him. Mara didn't flinch. She'd been expecting this. Camden had offered to be there, but she'd said no. This was hers to handle. She opened the door slowly. Bryce stood, there, coat half-buttoned, scarf thrown around his neck like a careless apology. His eyes widened when he saw her, upright, balanced between crutches with calm in her posture instead of fear. "You look better," he said. "You sound surprised." He walked in without invitation, like always. "I figured you'd be gone by now. I didn't think Camden Rourke would be so generous with my wife." "Ex-wife," she said flatly. "I filed this morning." That stopped him. His jaw twitched. "You're serious?" "Deadly," Bryce scoffed. "Come on, Mara. Be reasonable. You've had a rough time, I get it. I shouldn't have left you in the snow. Bad judgment. But don't blow up our whole life over it." "You didn't leave me in the snow, Bryce," she said. "You erased me. That's different." He rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic." "What, now you think Rourke's your savior? You think he cares?" "He didn't leave me freezing for an investor pitch." "You have no idea what I've been dealing with," he snapped. "The pressure I'm under, the expectations, and none of that justifies what you did. None of it." Bryce walked to the window and turned his back. "You were supposed to make me look good. And then the accident. Suddenly I'm the guy with the crippled wife, the sympathy vote." "Don't call me that," she said quietly. He turned. "I stayed, didn't I? I could have left right after the hospital." "But you didn't stay. You hovered. There's a difference." He moved toward her then, his tone softening. "Look, I messed up. But we can fix it. Come home. We'll see a counselor. I'll make a donation to whatever cause Camden's into. I just need you to undo whatever damage you've done with him." She stared at him for a long time. You still think this is about your job? Isn't it? No, Bryce. This is about me reclaiming my voice. So what? He's your boyfriend now? No, she said, but he's the first person in a year who made me feel seen. Bryce scoffed again. He'll get bored. He's a billionaire. This is a charity case to him. Then maybe I'll learn something about what kindness without strings feels like. Bryce stepped back, reading her silence as final. You're going to regret this. Maybe, she said, but at least it'll be my regret, not yours. He opened the door, paused. You never had the guts before. That was before I learned how much strength silence hides. He left without another word. Mara closed the door, locking it not just physically but emotionally. Behind her, Camden stood at the hallway edge, not intruding, just present. That sounded hard, he said. It was necessary, she replied. I didn't shake once. I noticed, Camden said. You didn't flinch either. She looked at him. I think I finally know what freedom feels like. The conference room at Rourke and Bell was all glass and chrome. Walls that reflected power, chairs that creaked only when men in pressed suits leaned forward to bluff. Mara had never imagined herself here. Certainly not like this. Not without Bryce at her side, smoothing her hair or nudging her into silence. Today she entered alone. The receptionist had tried to redirect her. Do you have an appointment? But Camden had seen her name on the log, and personally stepped into the hallway to escort her in. She's with me, he'd said. No fanfare, no performance, just fact. Now she stood beside him at the long boardroom table, facing 5 executives from legal and compliance. Ms. Eldon, one of them said, hesitating on the surname. It's Mara Fields now, she said evenly. The paperwork is processing. Camden gave a small nod. Mara is here as a witness and, with her permission, a contributor to our internal audit. Everything she shares will be treated as confidential unless required for legal reporting. One of the men shifted uncomfortably. This is highly irregular. So is what happened, Camden said. Then he stepped back, allowing her the room to speak. Mara cleared her throat. She'd written and rewritten her statement 3 times in her head, but now that she was here, the words came calmly. My husband, Bryce Eldon, has used my medical condition for leverage, she began, to gain sympathy, to manipulate contract extensions, to justify missed deadlines. I know this because I heard him rehearse the pitch more than once, practicing how to sound like a devoted caregiver while never actually being one. She told them about the falsified invoices, the donor dinner he used company funds to attend, the photos she'd seen of him with clients she was told didn't exist. She recounted the night he left her in the snow outside their own car and took her phone so she couldn't call anyone. And he said the optics mattered more than my comfort, she finished, that no one wanted to see crippled wives at a high-end firm. The room was silent. Even the HVAC system seemed to pause. One of the women from legal scribbled notes furiously. The older man at the end of the table folded his hands and looked at Camden. We've suspected fraud, he said. We didn't know it ran this deep. Camden simply said, You do now. Mara stepped back from the table, suddenly aware of how hot her palms had become. Camden guided her into the hallway without a word, but once they were alone, he looked at her with something quiet and strong. You just changed the outcome of this entire firm. I didn't mean to. You told the truth. That always matters. What if nothing comes of it? She asked. Then we'll keep telling it until something does. That evening, Camden invited her to a gallery opening, a small private one he co-sponsored to support disabled artists. She almost declined, but something in her said, Go. So she did. He offered his arm not to steady her, but to include her. When they arrived, no one stared. No one asked invasive questions. One woman even complimented her brace, called it steel elegance. And when a sculpture caught Mara's eye, cold, sharp marble curved into the shape of a woman rising from a cracked base, Camden leaned over and said, "That one reminds me of you." She didn't say anything, just held her breath. Because in that moment, she wasn't a statement or a case file or someone else had walked away from. She was becoming something else entirely. Her own. The keys felt heavy in her hand, not because they weighed much, but because of what they meant. Mara stepped into the apartment slowly, crutches tapping softly against the freshly cleaned floor. It wasn't large. 2 rooms, a modest balcony, and kitchen counters worn smooth by years of use. But it was hers. There were no echoes of Bryce's voice here, no shadows of a marriage that had rotted from the inside. The space smelled like sunlight and fresh paint, and the windows let in the kind of light she used to imagine while stuck inside hospital walls. Her name, Mara Fields, was printed clearly on the lease agreement folded in her purse. She stared at it every few hours just to prove it existed. Camden had offered to help her move in, but she'd told him she wanted to do it alone. Not out of pride, just to see if she could. And she could. It took her all day to unpack. Every plate felt like a decision. Every book, a boundary she could now choose where to place. Around sunset, she paused to rest, curling into the corner of her couch with a cup of tea she made for herself. That's when she heard the knock. Not urgent, just present. She opened the door to find Camden standing there, holding a brown paper bag and wearing that look of his. Quiet, but unmissable. "Dinner," he said. "And flowers." "Because you made it through moving day without smashing anything, which is more than I can say for myself last time." He handed her a small bundle of daisies. "They're unpretentious," he said. "Kind of like you." She laughed and stepped aside to let him in. They ate pasta on the floor because the table wasn't assembled yet, and when she spilled tomato sauce on her shirt, he wiped it gently and said, "It's a good color on you." Afterward, they didn't talk much. He helped her hang 2 prints on the wall, photos she'd taken before the accident, back when she believed she had something to offer the world. She watched him press each frame into place with the kind of reverence people usually reserved for art they didn't understand yet. When he finished, he stood back and looked at her. "You do know you're remarkable, right? I know I survived. That's not all you did." She felt the warmth rise to her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "You make it easy to believe. I still have value." He reached out slowly, not to touch her, but to hold space near her face. An offer, not a demand. "You always had value. You just needed someone to stop pretending you didn't." She leaned into that invisible space, letting the silence between them stretch and settle. No kiss, no declarations, just 2 people who knew they had crossed into something unspoken. When he left, he didn't say goodbye. Just, "See you soon," and she knew he meant it. Later that night, Mara sat on the balcony with a blanket around her shoulders, watching the city soften under twilight. She didn't feel small anymore, didn't feel broken. She felt beginning, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she wanted to be seen, not for pity, not for inspiration, but for everything she still was, and everything she could be. It was just after noon when the building's buzzer rang, 2 sharp pulses, impatient and unannounced. Mara set down her tea, knowing in her gut who it was before she even checked. She took her time crossing the apartment, not because of her leg, but because she didn't owe him urgency anymore. When she pressed the intercom button, her voice was calm. "Who is it?" "It's me," Bryce said. "Can we talk?" No apology, just expectation. Old habits die slow. She buzzed him in but didn't open the door until she'd grounded herself. When she did, she found him in a navy suit, fresh haircut, that signature aftershave she used to love but now found too sharp. He looked polished and completely unaware that his shine had dulled in her eyes. "Nice place," he said, stepping in without being invited. "Not bad for a starter." "It's not a starter," she replied. "It's a home." He smirked like she'd made a joke. "Listen, I heard about the audit at Rourke and Bell. You really went for it, huh?" "I told the truth, that's all." "You torched my career." "No," she said. "You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He dropped the fake charm and folded his arms. "You think that man cares about you, Camden? He's using you to clean up his image after a messy quarter." "He never asked me to defend him, only myself." Bryce walked through the living room like it still belonged to him. "You and I have history. You and Camden have proximity." "You left me in the snow, Bryce." "It was one mistake." "It was a reveal," she said, "of everything you actually believed about me once I wasn't perfect." "Don't act like you were a saint. You checked out after the accident. You expected me to do everything." "I expected a partner. What I got was a witness who kept walking." He rubbed his jaw. "Okay. Fine. Maybe I messed up. But you and I, there's still time to fix this. You can't seriously think he wants you long-term." "I don't care what you think he wants," she said. "I care that I can hear myself think when he's around. I care that he looks me in the eye when I talk. And I care that he never once made me feel like I was too much trouble." Bryce scoffed. "So that's it? You're done?" "I was done the moment you turned the ignition and left me behind." His jaw clenched. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," she said. "But at least I'll be free to feel it on my own terms." He didn't slam the door when he left, but the click of it closing was louder than any fight they'd ever had. That night, Mara told Camden what had happened. They were walking through a local bookstore, the kind with creaky floors and mismatched lamps. He listened quietly, then asked only one question. "Are you okay?" "More than I expected," she said. "Less than I will be." He nodded. "That's a good place to be, between wounds and wings." She smiled. He didn't offer her a future. He didn't push for more. But when they left, he reached for her hand, not to lead, not to rescue, but to hold. And this time, she let him. The invitation came folded between a newspaper and a handwritten note from Camden that simply read, "Come see yourself the way the world should have always seen you." Mara ran her fingers over the heavy card stock and exhaled. The gallery was one of the most respected in the city, a space where emerging voices in art were given platforms that once belonged only to the elite. Camden had submitted her photographs, portraits she'd taken before the accident, landscapes she'd captured from her hospital window, and the new series, self-portraits taken one frame at a time as she learned to trust her reflection again. He hadn't told her. He wanted it to be a surprise. But now her name was printed on the exhibit wall in clean serif font. Mara Fields. Light between the fractures. The opening was intimate, warm. No red carpets, no champagne flutes. Just honest light and raw truth. She walked in slowly, her crutches soft against the polished floor, and instantly felt the hush that followed recognition. Not fame, not notoriety, but reverence. Her work hung at eye level, unretouched, each image whispering, "Here I am." This is what strength looks like. One was a close-up of her hands, knuckles scarred, painted with gold leaf. Another, her standing in silhouette beside a window, brace outlined under the dress like armor. She stood beneath the largest frame, one Camden had chosen himself, and read the caption printed underneath. "I am not what you left. I am what I became after." She didn't cry. She smiled. Camden arrived an hour later, deliberately letting her own the room before stepping in. When he finally came beside her, he said nothing, just slipped his hand into hers. "Do you see it now?" he whispered. "What I saw from the beginning?" "I think I'm starting to," she replied. "But it feels unreal." That's how healing always starts, like a dream you don't quite believe you're allowed to have. People approached her throughout the evening. Curators, strangers, young women with tears in their eyes. One said, "Your work made me call my mother. We haven't spoken in 2 years." Another whispered, "You gave my pain a mirror." Even Bryce's boss came, unannounced, shook her hand, and said with deep sincerity, "Thank you for showing us what he tried to hide." By the end of the night, a bidding war had quietly begun for one of her prints, not for the profit, but for the truth it held. Mara stepped outside with Camden as the gallery lights dimmed. Snow had begun to fall again, soft and clean. "I don't feel invisible anymore," she said. "You never were," he replied. "You were just waiting for the moment you no longer needed permission to take up space." "Do you think it lasts?" she asked. "This kind of clarity?" "Only if you keep choosing it," he said, "over and over until it becomes who you are." She turned to him. This man who had never once treated her as broken, never tried to fix her, never asked for anything in return for his care. "Camden?" "Yes?" "I'm not ready to say I love you, but I'm not afraid of it anymore." He smiled, the kind of smile that didn't rush or reach. That's more than enough. It began like an ordinary morning. Light spilled through the east-facing window of Mara's new apartment, warm and golden, filtering across the couch where she sat barefoot, coffee mug in hand. Camden had left at dawn for a meeting, but not before scribbling, "Today is yours. Claim it." On a sticky note, he pressed to the refrigerator door. She smiled as she read it again, then looked around her space. Paintings on the wall, her camera on the table, an orchid blooming on the windowsill. For the first time in a long time, the silence in her home didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. At exactly 10 a.m., her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Fields?" the voice asked. "This is Monica Elridge from Hartman and Cole. We're calling to confirm that the civil suit against your former husband has been officially settled." Mara blinked. "Settled?" "Yes, ma'am. His attorneys have signed the full admissions of financial fraud and emotional misconduct. He's forfeited his shares and withdrawn his name from all pending contracts. You'll receive a letter of formal apology. His statement includes acknowledgement of neglect and endangerment." "Thank you," she said softly. "Would you like a copy of the final judgment?" Monica asked. Mara looked out the window. "Number, I don't need proof anymore." She ended the call and exhaled. Slow, long, full. There were no fireworks, no parade, just her, sitting on a couch in a tiny apartment, finally free. That afternoon, she walked to the flower market with no agenda. No one recognized her. No one pointed or whispered. She bought white, tulips, and took the long way home. Camden joined her just before dinner. They ate on the balcony as the sky turned lavender, not speaking much, just letting the day settle into their bones. As dusk fell, Mara opened the folder she'd been too afraid to touch for weeks. Inside, a draft grant proposal for a photojournalism project she'd shelved years ago, thinking no one would ever care about a disabled woman's view of the world. She slid it across the table. "I'm submitting it next week." Camden glanced through it, eyebrows raised. "This is powerful." "It's honest," she said. "I'm done pretending smaller so other people feel bigger." He looked at her. Not just proud, but steady, like he'd always known she would get here. You're not just surviving anymore, Mara. You're living. And this time, she said, no one else gets to narrate the story but me. As the stars came out, they stood together in the doorway, hands clasped, and for once, the past felt small. Behind her was everything she'd endured. Ahead, everything she chose. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need pity. All she needed was this, a man who saw her, a name she chose, and a future no one else had scripted. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on General Common Tales. If you'd heard his cruel words in that snow, would you have stayed silent or stepped in? Tell us in the comments.